So you can imagine the feel-goodness is sort of going to be overwhelmed by the panic that ensues when you see your fucking 170 over 120 blood pressure and you have a fucking geyser nosebleed every 10 minutes. What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about methadrostenolone, also known as Dianabol, also known as Dbol. So most of you guys probably know Dbol is Dbol, but the chemical name is methadrostenolone, and the Dianabol Dbol is a brand. It's not actually the drug itself. It's almost like when you hear Deca or Durabolin, where the actual, compound is nandrolone decanoate, for example. So methadrostenolone is the drug in question today. As far as how it feels, I could easily get into a tangent talking about the pharmacology of it, and kind of how it impacts certain subsystems in the body and whatnot. But basically what you need to know as far as how it feels in general is a very broad spectrum anabolic agent. The reason being is because it is one of the very few agents that can actually function as a, test base, in replacement or in lieu of testosterone, as a, functional compound that is a substrate for aromatase and will actually create enough not actual estradiol, it creates methyl estradiol in a sufficient quantity to activate estrogen receptors and fulfill physiologic functions that make it a compatible compound to run as your kind of like your broad spectrum kind of like test base. That's the best way to put it realistically. So there's very few compounds that really check off the boxes in terms of actually providing enough estrogenic activity to be a viable candidate. The only downside of Dianabol, of course, is its hepatotoxicity, being an oral agent. So obviously long-term it's not the most ideal candidate, but clinically, like historically, it was used at 5 to 10 milligrams as therapeutic HRT for men. So they would deem 5 to 10 milligrams the equivalent of, what you would naturally produce per week, or like at a high level, how much testosterone you would produce. This replicates that androgenicity. As far as the estrogenicity, it would be, the actual estrogen it produces, methyl estradiol, actually has a much lower affinity for the estrogen receptor than bioidentical estradiol created by testosterone. However, supposedly it's more metabolism resistant. Now, this is another one of those things that's pulled out of Llewellyn's book, who is, where we also saw the thing about, EQ aromatizes at 50% the rate of testosterone. And we all know, EQ is essentially the same drug as Dianabol, except not orally active. And I don't know if you saw my EQ video, I basically dissected the shit out of that and proved that it is not the case whatsoever. So I wouldn't be surprised if that whole like metabolism resistant estrogen hypothesis is, way the fuck off, for all we know. But anyways, that is the proposed way by which the estrogen produced by Dianabol is, extra potent, even though its affinity for ER is much lower. However, one thing that is very notable, and circling back to how it actually feels, is the sort of like GABAergic interaction it sort of has inherently. So by that, I mean, it's a very feel-good compound. It's not one that really drives significant like volatility in terms of like aggression. It's not something that is going to make you depressed either. It's something that in general produces a state of well-being. And I'm not saying to use it because of that. I'm just saying in general, like when I've used it, that is what I've experienced. And it seems like the consensus among other users is typically this compound feels better than the other compounds. Now, this is in the context of a reasonable dosage. You have to keep in mind, a lot of people, when they use Dianabol, they're using it in an insane way. They're stacking it on top of their test base, and their test base, of course, is the Broforum 500 milligram test base with an AI with Dianabol stacked on top of it at 30 to 40 milligrams. So you can imagine the feel-goodness is sort of going to be overwhelmed by the panic that ensues when you see your fucking 170 over 120 blood pressure and you have a fucking geyser nosebleed every 10 minutes. So, there's a bit of a nuance when it comes to me stating that. But Dianabol in general, like from what I can tell, it's it's very side effect ridden in terms of its ability to bloat you specifically, but this is typically in users who have shitty diets, in addition to that, are stacking it in the way I mentioned previously, where they're just overwhelming their body with ridiculous amounts of estrogen and overlapping drugs with similar, like mechanisms of action on top of one another, like slapping like two things that are like heavy substrates for aromatase on top of one another, and having like no kind of like, balancing out compounds, like no DHT derivatives, no, not a 19-nor, like obviously 19-nors can be problematic when it comes to estrogenicity as well in some contexts, but like in general, you would not just take like fucking as much test as you can, stack as much Dianabol as you can on top of that, and then stack, well, actually one of the best bulking stacks is Dbol Deca Test, which is like, when you actually get into, if you actually have ever tried Dbol Deca Test at the dosages, prescribed on the forums back in the day, like you probably experienced the absolutely astronomical bloat that turned you into the Michelin Man. That was what the combination of those would do at the dosages prescribed back in the day by, the vets in the community who would just like shit on you for even questioning the logic, So don't do that. That's my suggestion. Dianabol as a test base, functions adequately, or else the scientists who developed it would not have determined it was a viable, replacement therapy for HRT. And it in fact was. It's been phased out nowadays and it is seen as a subpar alternative. However, for certain performance enhancing aspects, for people with certain propensities to certain issues, for people that need shorter, more acute performance outcomes, for people who need more, X, fill in the blank here, for some people, it may make more sense in some capacity to, lean towards it for certain situations. I'm not saying it's better than testosterone at all. In fact, 99% of people would be probably be better off with testosterone. However, the thing about it, I'm sort of getting off track with how it feels, but one thing I guess you could say you feel too is your lower back, which is not really mood related, but it is literal physical pain related. So Dianabol famously is the worst compound for lower back pumps. And this is something that you would know very well if you've ever taken probably 30 milligrams or more of real Dianabol and done deadlifts or squats heavy, and realized by the end of the session that you needed to go lie down in a massage chair for about 30 minutes to muster up the mental fortitude to crawl the fuck out of the gym and get in your car and then hyperextend your back as you drive home because your back's fucking killing you. That is one of the things that Dbol feels like too, is it's going to cause ridiculous back pumps if you don't run it in an intelligent way. And you don't use it in the way I mentioned previously, where you're using a ridiculously aggressive dose and slapping it on top of other compounds that make really no sense to slap it on top of. So in the context in which it is a replacement as a test base, it functions quite well. And the performance outcomes are incredible. A lot of it is driven through its, mineral retentive properties almost, though. The way it, intramuscular fullness on it is insane. It's one of the only compounds that within 1 to 2 weeks, like people can tell you're on gear. Like they're gonna look at you and be like, what the fuck? Like this is the compound the guys in high school took, who all of a sudden their bench would go from 2 plates for 1 to 2 plates for 10 within 4 to 6 weeks. And then they would say they took 2 scoops of Sizon, when in reality, they were using 30 to 40 milligrams of Dianabol per day on its own. And you can tell I have a personal experience with this because of the specificity of the situation. It was the 2 scoops of Sizon and doing a bunch of push-ups. That was the story going around about what I can only presume to be Dianabol results in real time. And there was me, rail thin Derek, being like, oh, that's the fucking secret, while I'm having my fucking NO explode, plasma jet, fucking Sizon, fucking whatever shit. And it's funny, like looking back on that stuff now. So, but anyways, feels quite good. Honestly, it has, there's sort of contradictory opinions in the community about how it impacts cortisol as well. If you actually look up the clinical literature, you see that it increases cortisol. And I would imagine I would think this would be driven through its interaction with the glucocorticoid receptor. I don't know why there are, people asserting that it lowers cortisol and like its feel-good effects are modulated through that, because it does not seem to play out in practical application. There's like actual clinical data in humans showing that it increases serum cortisol levels. So I'm not really sure where that came from, but I do not think that is one of the mechanisms by which it makes you like feel good necessarily. I think it is more so its aromatization into methyl estradiol and the way methyl estradiol interacts with your neurology specifically. I think that is mainly what is driving its, sense of well-being. Because at the end of the day, what are the compounds that like feel the best? It's going to be like the broad spectrum ones that like check off as many boxes as possible with, like a relative lack of throwing other shit off. So if you have like trenbolone in there with nothing else, you have no estrogen, you're just on tren, like you're gonna be a fucking mess. But if you're on testosterone, you have that conversion to DHT, you have that conversion to estradiol, you have the inherent effects of testosterone, you have all of these boxes being checked off and hitting different things in the body, neuroprotection, cardioprotection, hitting like adequate estrogen receptor agonism, blah, blah, blah. Those are the compounds that are overall going to feel the best, because ultimately they are the ones that are actual like viable HRT candidates. So like it's not a surprise in my opinion that TRT, testosterone, feels the best, and Dianabol also like feels pretty fucking good too. So, that is sort of what it is. It's almost just like, it's not an oral test. It's not like that. It's just like, it does produce a very like, good sense of well-being. And it's obviously, your lift's going up by like 50 pounds in 6 weeks feels pretty good too. So you're on like an artificial high from that, because you get this giant spike in strength that is largely driven through enhanced leverage too, through your fucking intramuscular fullness that you gain within the first few weeks. The cranking of your strength is absolutely like unmatched. Well, it's not unmatched on Dianabol, but it's quite good and quite dramatic. So yeah, I'm sure, you guys can drop your opinions down below, but that is sort of my experience with it. It's if you can actually run it properly and not succumb to the temptation of overdosing on it and combining it with a bunch of dumb compounds and ending up with a chronic nosebleed in a bottle, you will probably have a better experience with it than the others who ran it the bro way and ended up just in a doctor's office panicking because they think they're having a heart attack because their blood pressure is 180 over fucking 130 or some shit, and they're like literally can't even like get up out of a chair without their heart rate going to 130 and fucking spiking a nosebleed in the squat rack every time they go in the gym. So yeah, the compound has a lower margin of error. That is actually a good point I should bring up. The margin of error is low because it is not targeted action, really. It is very broad spectrum in its effects, despite it being not a potent substrate for 5-alpha reductase. The inherent, like it converts, I believe, to methyl testosterone. I might have to look that up actually. Yeah, so it does convert to methyl 1 testosterone, M1T. I was like trying to remember what the fuck variation of methyl testosterone it was, because it's like the methyl estradiol is the type of estrogen it produces, and then you have the methyl 1 testosterone. I don't know if you remember that M1T was one of the like, I thought it was a shitty prohormone personally, but it was one of like the super toxic ones that was sold at like GNC, the supplement stores back in the day. But yeah, I bet a lot of you guys didn't realize it is the 5-alpha reduced metabolite of Dianabol, and then packaged up into one pill and sold as like this heavily androgenic fucking shit steroid, essentially over the counter, that's incredibly liver toxic to teenagers. So anyways, Dbol, the parent compound, is not really a potent substrate for 5-alpha reductase, so the conversion to M1T is somewhat negligible, supposedly. So it's not going to make that much of a difference if you use finasteride, dutasteride. It's sort of like a tangent, but it sort of is going to impact the net impact of it on the brain at the end of the day, how much kind of like adrenergic signaling it creates. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a relatively overarching HRT type feeling product. So drop your experiences down below. That is sort of my stance. It is low margin of error because of the interaction with everything that needs to be accounted for. And I guess if I guess the margin of error is actually like reasonable if you're not running it like an idiot and you're not stacking on top of 500 tests. But to be honest, most of my experiences in the past were running it like an idiot. So that's probably why I'm saying that. But, and probably the context in which most people use it is probably running it in that same fashion. So yeah, in that context, it has a low margin of error. So the mood thing, yeah, it's like one of the unique compounds in that it's very like pro mood elevation, feel good, less like volatile aggression, you know, fly off the handle type shit that you would get from other compounds potentially. So anyways, let me know your experience down below. What's your best back pump story? That maybe I'll do a video on Dbol back pump story, or tell me how you feel on it, what your experience is. Do you have any good Michelin Man stories, becoming the Michelin Man? Do you have any good stories about back pumps that were crippling that you then needed to do something like weird, like lie down in the middle of the gym and have people look at you weird because your back was fucking destroyed? Or lying in your car for like an hour in the car parking lot and people think you're dead because you're just fucking sleeping in the car. You know, all the good things that come with Dbol. So anyways, like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates. Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. I'm doing this one fucking quick today, boys. Holy shit. HRT Clinic. If you want to support me, check it out. Anything else? Gorilla Mind, Gorilla Mode, nootropic formulas, pre-workout formulas, whatever it is that I create, it's all fucking down there. And anything else I'm associated with, video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.